Hi, and welcome to the opening session of the McKnight's Workforce Development Forum. You're tuned in to Modern Careforce, what they're looking for in current trends. I'm McKnight's Executive Editor, Jim Berkland, and I'm your moderator. Everybody would love to know the secret to attracting and keeping more workers. Put in even more general terms, everyone would like to hone in on the motivations and hopes of today's caregiving workforce. That is perhaps the ultimate key to building and maintaining an ongoing successful workplace. Lucky for us, our speakers are going to tackle just those topics. I'll be introducing them in a moment, but first we have some housekeeping matters to take care of. Today's slides are not available for download. We're going to give you a video presentation. If you are having audio problems, please first check the volume control on your machine. This is the most common cause of these problems. You also have a help button to use if your own troubleshooting doesn't work. Also, we will have time for a Q&A session near the end of the presentation. If you have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to tap them out and submit them directly to us, starting now. Those we don't get to in real time will be answered afterward. Now, regarding continuing education. This educational offering has been reviewed by the National Continuing Education Review Service of the National Association of Long-Term Care Administrator Boards. It has been approved for 1 clock hour, but you need to stay tuned in to this event for its entirety during the original broadcast in order to receive a certificate. You can track CE requirements through the course completion tracker, which is accessed through the last icon in the area below the open webinar panel. Once you've achieved 50 viewing minutes, a View Certificate button will display and the required viewing duration will show a green checkbox. You can then view or save your certificate. A copy will also be emailed to you afterward. We'd like to note that this program is made possible by support from CARE. Please visit them at www.doyoucare.com. Finally, this session will be archived and available on demand shortly after this live broadcast. You can access it again, or others can experience it for the first time by simply going to the registration page to enter this studio. The URL is McKnight's.com, 111523, Workforce Development Forum, all smushed together. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Nick Jasmine is Vice President of Business Development at American Healthcare Management Group and partner at Elevate Senior Living. He oversees the sales and marketing, life engagement, and maintenance functions of AHMG's senior living communities. He also serves as a key member on the competitive analysis team and leads the Family Enterprise Division of AHMG along with the Cost Reduction Service platform. Katie Ramp is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Georgia Senior Living Association. She is an accomplished association and nonprofit leader with more than 20 years of experience in team leadership development, strategic planning, and community and member engagement. She also runs her own consulting firm. Evan Coe serves as the Regional Vice President and General Manager at CARE. Prior to CARE, he was the Vice President of National Accounts and Director of Sales at Sherpa CRM, where he was instrumental in the growth and success of that firm. Well, it's been a mouthful, but Evan, if you're ready, I'd like to hand it off to you.
Jim, thank you so much for the introduction and going through some housekeeping items. We at CARE appreciate the opportunity here to sponsor this webinar, and special thanks goes to Nick and Katie for joining us. Katie, this is round 2 for you, so you should be a pro at this with CARE. Or I won't put words in your mouth or my mouth yet, but we'll see how this goes at the end of our hour. And then Nick, we appreciate you joining us and sharing some knowledge with what you guys are doing at AHMG and Elevate Senior Living. So let's dive in. Once again, Evan with CARE, and we're going to go through a lot of today's sessions going to be based around our latest white paper called Do You Know Caregivers? And we're going to use that to kind of base our conversation from the case study and just talk about the gap between caregivers, the positions in the industry, the shortage of labor, and also talk about technology, whether it's AI, communication, and other software, and really just have an open conversation about where we're at with workforce. So let's start with this. Nick, from the case study, Do You Know Caregivers, the white paper that we just released, what are some of the most interesting findings from the study any misconceptions, things that you took from that and you guys are using in your day-to-day. I'll leave the floor open for you to start, and we can go to Katie.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the first thing was there was a lot of things that validated what we feel and think, and there was a lot of stuff that I think we need to change kind of our thought process around it. A lot of validating things is kind of just the average age of CNAs and how important medical insurance is for them. You know, that's something that I think we all kind of can see if you just go into your building. But the things that I think really we need to change as operators is what they're actually looking for. You know, they're looking for more affordable health insurance, and they're not looking for childcare, which personally, as I read it, I thought would be one of the highest things, but they're actually looking for tuition reimbursement. I think that's super interesting. Just if you think of the average age being 41, they're still looking to find ways to advance their career. They don't want to stay in that exact position forever, which I think is great. I mean, I think we need to tap into that. You know, we want higher retention in our buildings, so let's give them the opportunity to get that, be able to earn that, and so on. So yeah, I think those were the biggest findings, at least for me, reading through this.
Let me dive in a little deeper there. But first, I want to go to Katie. So I'll do that in a sec. Katie, thoughts, feelings around the case study? Did it surprise you? What are you hearing from your members? What are you hearing directly?
Sure. I think I'm going to echo what Nick said. The age of 41 was actually a little bit older than I thought. So we often think child reimbursement is such a great benefit. And look at us, we're doing so great by offering something like that. But these are folks that maybe don't have the need for childcare. Their kids are a bit older. What I loved, and Nick talked about it, was the continuing education. That's what they're looking for, and not just continuing education. This is not just making me better. It's making me better in the skill set that I'm already working. It's clinical, and there is a forward motion there. I think there's a responsibility on us to foster up a healthy workforce by giving them the education that helps them succeed. It makes us better, but it also makes them better. The last piece that I loved, and I think you and I have had a conversation about this before, Evan, is that we have benefits that we offer in our buildings to our employees, and people don't understand them. And part of the research said even the administrators or the managers didn't understand them. And the more we understand the benefits, why it's great to work for us, why are we good, how are we investing in our employees, the better we're going to translate to that to those folks that work with us. And gosh, retention sticks with people that love what they do and feel like they're being honored outside of just the typical paycheck that comes in.
Yeah, those are great points. And something that I want to touch on that both of you talked about is we work so hard to attract frontline caregivers into our building, also housekeeping, culinary, servers. But what are we doing to keep them in the building, right? And that's where these, we'll call them extrinsic benefits or intrinsic benefits, depending on what you offer as an operator. But besides moving up in a clinical field, what are you offering? Are you offering them, advancement in education pieces to become maybe an admin from, a CNA, or there's other routes outside of just the clinical fields where in our study that I actually gave at GSLA just a couple weeks ago when I was at your association conference, Katie, is the conversation was around, we think that frontline caregivers want these things, but are we really asking them that question? Have we actually sat down to truly understand what do they want? What do they value? How do they want to be treated? Are they being heard? And the points that you guys touched on, I think, bring that forward even further. So let me ask this. Nick, when you guys are going out to market to try to attract labor to come into your buildings, is there anything unique you guys are doing? Are you just kind of doing, the status quo, or what's different for you guys as an operator? Because I know you guys do a great job with internal culture. Speak on that for me.
Yeah, so I think we look at where we're getting our staff. We look at it the same way we look at the sales process, right? We look at where are we getting our staff, where are the people that we're retaining, and what is that profile? So a lot that we're really trying to recruit is we're trying to have people have the opportunity to grow within our building. I want us to have more stories where somebody started as a housekeeper and they are an executive director in our building in a couple years. So we're looking at trying to partner with nonprofits to do job training programs. That's what we're doing with Elevate. We're looking at nursing schools, clinicals that they need their hours to either get into it, or something as simple as, hey, I can't not work while in school. So I just need a couple more hours. Let's get them indoctrinated in our culture early so that when we need an executive director, need an administrative manager, we know that we have a reliable employee, and then we can train anybody to be a good business office, a good sales, clinical, or executive director. So we just are looking for that character piece of it.
I love that. It's the old grow or go adage, right? And go shouldn't be the only option, right? It should be grow leaders. There's also a statistic out there that we are, and I presented this in Georgia, but we are promoting half as a percentage than acute care hospitals are as far as into leadership percentage. I think post-acute care, somewhere between 15 to 20% leaders are promoted from within. Mm-hmm. Hospital systems are over 40%. And that was from a NIC data case study that they released right around COVID. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to promote leaders from within as long as you're growing them, right? You can't just take certifications out of thin air. You can't just push them into positions they're not ready for. But what does that journey look like from when they first come in for an interview with Nick? And then what does that look like when they leave and they go through that exit interview, which hopefully is years and years and years down the road after many promotions? Katie, I want to keep going on a couple of things that you mentioned. When you talk about benefits, let's just talk about what operators are offering in the state of Georgia. What are you hearing from some of operators that are part of your association? What are they doing to try to keep people within their organizations and not leaving to go take that 50 cents more an hour job, at another operator or competitor or co-op petition down the street?
Sure. I think there is the general. You're going to look at the 401k. You're going to look at the medical leave, the general things that you expect. We have seen some increase in childcare. I don't think that has been across the board. I really think that's a nuanced conversation that people are having with an idea. We do see the flex scheduling. I've had some really great conversations just recently with operators that are grouping their staff to talk about how are we flex scheduling together. And there's a dependence on that cohort that says, all right, we have these 40 hours that we have to cover in this XYZ time. Who's doing what? And if you fall down, there's a responsibility to the rest of that team. I think that flexibility is interesting. I do think it puts a lot of onus on some staff members and raises stress levels. So as we're talking about emerging leaders and helping folks learn to become better administrators or business office managers, I think there's a responsibility on us to train them in the management of people as well, and not just say, here's a good idea, go try that. But that's one of the areas that I've seen this kind of the flex idea that's maybe a little sideways from the general flex idea of hourly scheduling. The other piece is really making sure that the technology that we're asking someone to step into is prepared for them. There's nothing worse than inviting someone into a conversation that says, let's get better, figure it out, and not being prepared. Our back ends need to be prepared for that. Our buildings need to be prepared for that. Our residents, but really our teams and our trainers inside of that. And so that feels like an added benefit. If I can walk in and say, oh, I know how to use this new technology that's going to help me take care of a resident better, I feel like I'm doing my job better, and that my review in the end is better because of that preparation that someone else in fact did.
Yeah, those are great points. There's always a battle, I feel like, between what is enabling us to do our job more efficiently and then what are we adding on from a technology standpoint, right? Speaking specifically on that, especially coming from the SaaS side, right? The technology side with Care and with some other companies I've worked for in the past is, am I giving Nick efficiencies to run his business better? Because at the end of the day, I think what a lot of technology and software solutions and vendors want to do is put technology in the hands of operators to allow those frontline caregivers, EDs, admins, clinicians to spend more time with residents. Mm-hmm. More time with residents should be the goal of every operator out there. And I think that is their goal. But sometimes these new technologies and softwares, they look shiny, they look great, but is it actually not allowing us for our end goal, which is what we're trying to solve, is how do we get more quality time and time in front of our residents and residents' families to take care of those for the reason that they're in these buildings. And
I imagine, Nick, that you don't want another dashboard. You want something that works together so that you can look down and figure out your best efficiencies operationally.
100%. If I put another dashboard in front of our team, I think they may just They may kill me. No. Yeah, I mean, exactly what you guys are saying. And we're trying to do different things. And both at American Healthcare Manager Group and Elevate, I mean, we're piloting a new program from a nurse call system where we're eliminating the need to go, hey, they pulled the pull cord to notify that something happened. We need to go flip that, then provide the care. We're doing it with GPS tracking, that the second that they get in there, it does not notify that you provide the care until you actually provide the care. We set the distance where, it could be 16 inches from the actual resident and they're wearable. So we're trying to do that not only so that we can provide better care for our residents, but also reward the care staff. A lot of times what we see is, if you give one caregiver a raise at their review, and they may or may not have been, in your own building, a great caregiver, a good caregiver, a bad caregiver. But the second you give that person a raise, you have to give it to everybody else. And there's not a lot of data to say you've actually earned the full raise versus not, like there is in sales and some of the manager positions. So we're using this as saying, hey, if you're really killing it as a caregiver, you're going to get rewarded accordingly. And if you're not, if your response times are low, if you're not hitting it, then you're not going to get the same. So we want to reward the ones that work really hard for that, and then also show we're going to hold the ones that aren't accountable, because that's a huge problem, at least for us, as part of retention and keeping the morale high. Hey, if I work harder, there's no benefit for me.
And people don't see it. And so utilizing technology like that helps to recognize and put metrics around it.
That's really interesting. Nick, I didn't know that you guys did that. So you're almost, we talk at Care about gamifying what our caregivers are doing, right? So we have basically, think of the Uber star rating, where if they get 4 or 5 stars, they get paid in real time. You're actually taking that to another level, saying we're going to basically performance-based pay or bonus, or almost like a commission based on your quality. So it's not just showing up for the same job and getting the same paycheck, right? Whatever that hourly amount is, but there is an opportunity to not only advance, right? Because I know you guys do that from within, you promote from within, but also the opportunity to add to their own socioeconomic statuses, where they thought a CNA only makes, let's call it $20 an hour, and that's flat, that's it. Mm-hmm. But you're giving them an opportunity in those positions to actually earn more. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, it's a way for us to track and reward the people that are working hard, and at the same time eliminating something that, like you said earlier, the mundane tasks that are just annoying. In CRMs, it's annoying to type in all this stuff. Well, I already called and did all this. Why do I got to type it in? So for them, it can be pulling the pull cord. As long as they're wearing their wearable that tracks it, and the resident is, they can just focus on providing the care. That's why all these people wanted to get into this job. They didn't want to get into it to fill out EHRs and pull cords and, document. They wanted to provide care. So let's allow them to do that and then reward them for that. And then be able to, on the other side, hold the ones that aren't meeting our standards and not providing great care accountable towards it. That's going to help us on the staffing side. And then for the actual family members, being able to say, hey, we are taking better care of your mother, and here is how. This is the data that shows they are.
That's great. That's great. I appreciate you diving further there. Katie, any other points or things that you want to bring up with the case study before we wrap up and kind of move to our next topic of conversation?
I loved this case study. It was perfectly timed for me. We're doing some things in terms of rules and regulations in Georgia, and so it was extremely helpful that I didn't have to pull data. One of the things I loved is we're seeing an increase of our 65 plus population in significant ways in our state. In the next 7 years, we're going to see that number increase by 52.5%. That's ridiculous. Looking at it from the national numbers and the amount of caregivers we are going to need, I mean, this is profound. We talk about the responsibility that we have to lead our new leaders, but we also need to find new leaders. We need to prepare this next generation, not just the 7 years here in Georgia, but the next 10 years in preparation to care for my parents. And one day for me, we look at caregiving often outside of the senior living space. If you can remove yourself from this knowledge, we look at it as a doctor's office, or we look at it as an urgent clinic or a school nurse. That's what we see when we say, I want to help somebody, I want to work in a medical field. Or you're thinking about caring for people in a school situation. We have a beautiful place for people to thrive with the skills that they have. We just have not given the language to that. And so and it's a personal mission that's a side note of mine, but in Georgia, I would love to see that banner raised higher in our technical schools. You were just talking about it, Nick, in your nursing programs, making sure that even your undergraduate schools that need nursing hours know that this is a really great option, because we need the people to continue this industry so well. We have a great character and a great integrity behind what we do. We need the people to continue that forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a huge topic of conversation when I was in Savannah with your state constituents at GSLA's annual conference. It was, we know we need people, and I'm speaking for an operator. We know we need CNAs. We know we need med techs, LVNs, RNs. We need housekeeping, kitchen staff. But where are those people? Mm-hmm. Where do we source and find those people? And I know you don't have as many skilled nursing as a part of the association, just based on, you guys being in our Genome arm. But there's been people taking the stand in DC talking about these new 24/7 roles with RNs. And the main point from everyone is, where do we get these RNs from? You're asking us to bring on hundreds of thousands of extra staff. Where do we source them from? Regulations are fine and dandy up until the point where they're not provided, right? So obviously, that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother webinar, so I won't dive too deep there, but it is a hot topic of conversation of we understand what it's like to open the funnel and keep people in our buildings and try to promote from within and give them pay for performance. But how do we close the back door, and then where do we get this large pool from? So that's great. I appreciate you talking about that. I know you get a lot of questions about that. What are you doing, Katie, with GSLA? So it's great to hear you touch on that. So let's shift gears a little bit. We touched on this a tad, and Katie, I'm gonna open with you just because you chatted about it just a little bit in your last answer. I want to talk about technology and the way your operators in the state, and really you just hosted a annual conference and trade show. So you had a lot of technology in your booths and a lot of state partners that are coming in. What are you hearing people are using, or what are they looking to use? What are you looking for in the future? What are you hearing from everyone in the state of Georgia?
Listen, this is a hot topic in my world. I've just been invited to sit on the advisory board for Age Tech Atlanta, and we focus on watching technology in the age, tech, and longevity space. And so there are really cool things coming out. My conversation around this is, how integratable is it? You may have awesome things, but if I can't retrofit it into a building at a cost that is reasonable, it's not going to happen. It may be the best thing ever, but I will tell you that people are looking for new ways. We obviously will talk about staffing in this space. We're seeing technology being used in ways that we acknowledge and represent our staff in communication structures. Sure. The general things, we're going to talk about EMR, all of that. I'm loving watching the development of care. Utilizing AI even right now. It's a easy implementable equipment into a room, and watching the movement of our residents, but also gearing that, it's done in a stick figure. There's not a privacy issue around it, but watching what our staff is doing in the room, because how often do we send a staff member into a room and they end up picking up something and folding some blankets and doing this, things that are not typical for what their role is, and that costs us money all of the time. We want to provide the very best care. However, we also want to make sure that we're being efficient with the resources that we have so that our staff can do their jobs well. So I'm loving watching that development and the better care for our residents, utilizing not just AI, but technology in a larger scheme.
Yeah, that's great. It was fun to walk around and when you go to conferences and trade shows and just see what's new faces, new products. But once again, is it helping or hurting us, right? Is it allowing us to spend more time with the residents? And do we have bandwidth, especially today, right? With a clinician shortage. Yeah. And I'll let Nick go into that more because he actually operates these buildings. So Nick, tell me some ways you guys are using technology, HR space, labor space, clinician space. Would love just to hear more.
Yeah. Echoing what Katie said, a lot of stuff that's coming out is really cool. I think I'll speak for all operators. Technology is really cool, but it does have to be implementable, integrate into our systems, and be cost effective. So if there's any vendors here, please lower your prices. But No, so I mean, just thinking about technology for the sake of technology isn't going to improve anybody's life or job. We need to find a way to make technology do what it's intended to, make our lives easier for just the care staff, for the management team and the home office team all the way across. And it can't be easier for one and then make the other one's job harder. Otherwise, we're never going to use it fully. So we're looking, I mean, the stuff that I talked about with what we're doing in Elevate is stuff we're piloting. We've seen a lot of success piloting a lot of these tech solutions to see, hey, if it can work in this particular environment, we can make it work in every other one. Whether it's setting them up for success where we want to figure out all of the hiccups that are going to happen with a really strong team, or, hey, this seems like a fail-safe product. Let's put it in a building that kind of struggles to implement this. And if they can do it, then hey, everyone can do it. There's no excuses. So just looking at it like that. But I'm really excited with the innovations in technology on the care side to see, hey, how can we reward our caregivers for doing a better job? How can we, predict when residents are going to need additional care? How can we to try and prevent it or just, be more prepared for it? So, yeah.
And I think unified operations, the dashboard component we were talking about, if we can get, that is growing. I think every conference you're going to go to in the next year, we're going to be talking about unified operations. It makes us efficient. And my hope is that when we're efficient, it's not just about the dollar amount to the resident, the bed per day. This is about how we're utilizing our time with our team members. It's how we're building culture in our communities. I love taking care of people because I think our people then take care of people well. And if we can use technology to help us along that road, then we're going to be better. I like what you said, Nick. Technology for the sake of technology is nothing. It's nothing. If we're doing it to be better, gosh, we've got some awesome distance to cross.
Yeah, technology for the sake of technology, right? There's new and shiny objects out there everywhere, and I think that's great. The innovation in the industry has come so far in such a short amount of time. I feel like we're making leaps and bounds. And when I first got in the industry, it was always like, oh, we're 10 to 15 years behind acute hospital side, right? Like that's all I heard when I first jumped into space on the software side about 10 years ago. And I feel like we are adding things to the mix or to the operator's, tool belt, if you will, to help us catch up from a technology side. Because you're right, Katie, when you don't know what goes on within the four walls of the operations of a community, you think it's exactly the examples you gave. You just don't fully understand. I like to say they're university settings for the 60 plus that happen to have a clinical component to it, right? It's fun to think of it that way. And it's a different way to think of it. So let me bring this back to Nick. Let's talk about like HR labor practices here. Is there anything that you guys have implemented, whether it's technology or software, when you're onboarding, when you're hiring, anything with efficiencies to reach out to schedule next steps, anything in regards to like that labor onboarding process?
Yeah, so we put them through the entire training process, making sure that we're in compliance with the state when we're onboarding them. And then we'll have repeating in-services on these systems so that whenever somebody enters in it, by the time that they would be there for 90 days, they've gone through the entire training at least once in that first 90 days. So then at any point in 90 days, they've seen everything. And then just, getting feedback from them of what challenges are they seeing. We can see from the home office or from the community leadership standpoint that these things aren't getting done. And that's all great and dandy. But then we have to go ask, hey, why aren't these things getting done? Or why are we not seeing these? We want to trust that you're doing it, but have to validate. So then seeing what are the issues? Hey, I think I'm putting them in. Why aren't you seeing them? That's an easy fix. We didn't click a button. Or, hey, I don't have time to. Let's communicate that we don't have time because we're at a threshold between, hey, one more movement and we add an additional staff member. So, hey, we need to add that person earlier than we were projected just because of what they're telling us. So communicating and being inside your building. The technology is great, but if you're not inside it to see that it is actually working, then it means nothing. Because I can tell you, looking from here, I don't know, what my salesperson's doing this moment. I know what they're supposed to be doing, but same with the care staff. I know what they're supposed to be doing, but are they actually going to do it?
I think it's important we get feedback through that process too. We need to trust that, we depend on technology for the development of what we're doing, but sometimes the personal contact gives value to that new staff member. You know, you're 30, 60, 90. Can you make that a personal touch point? It does not have to be you in a corporate office. It doesn't even have to be your administrator. But is there a sit down time to say, hey, how's it going? Here's 3 minutes. Give me some feedback on what you're facing. Did this process work? Talk to me about your speed to hire. What did that feel like? Because we can project the idea on that, but unless we actually get the feedback, we're making a lot of assumptions.
Yeah, speed to hire. That's interesting because we always hear, Nick and I come from the sales and marketing side of the world. We hear speed to lead, right? And Katie, you know this too, right? You talk to the prospects, talk to the prospect's family, get that tour set up, right? Get them moving on the next step. Because if you're in higher levels of care, higher acuity, this is a much quicker decision than maybe like an IL move-in or active living, something similar. But what about speed to lead on the labor side? How quickly are you getting to those applicants? Because chances are, Katie, if I'm Evan, the CNA, I'm probably sending my application out to 3, 4, 5, 6 other places, not to mention other industries. Right? We lost 500,000 caregivers during COVID. They left because their heart wasn't in it. They were scared of the repercussions. They had family matters, or they were just making money in other industries, or they thought they could make money in other industries. So what are we doing to retain that staff, right? How quickly are we getting to those applicants to set up next steps? So your co-opetition down the street or wherever they may come from, in industry and out of industry, what are we doing to make sure we speed that up?
I think that answer is twofold. I think there's a responsibility on the community, and I think there's a responsibility on your state. In our state, it's taking too long. So I'm boots on the ground working with our regulatory body on what that process looks like, because for that, it's a background check issue, right? That's not the same case in every other state. I think we have to be prepared. Nick was talking about it just a minute ago with, you know, I've got one more move in and it changes my ratio numbers. I need to change to stay. Then I need to be 2 or 3 steps ahead of that. I need to know, partnering with my marketing team, all right, there's a potential of 3 to 5 more people. That means my staff needs to change. How do I stay a week and a half? How do I stay 2.5 weeks ahead of that? Our recruitment process, I was at a conference last week or the week before, and the recruitment process is not for the jobs that you have open right now. It's for the jobs you foresee being open, so that you can make a telephone call and say, I'm ready. Can you walk in this door? That sounds so simple. There are so many more steps behind that. I'm sure there are all sorts of HR professionals on this call that realize there's more inside of that. But our job is to be a step ahead of prepared. Sometimes I like to think of you work in things, right? You're inside of the detail and the minutia of what we're doing. I think there's a lot to be said for leadership to work on things. Can I step back 3 months ahead and say, what's my prediction? Just like I would do in finances. What's my prediction in staffing so I can be prepared for the next step? And then train your staff to that. Train the staff that there's always going to be someone new, and we may move in a cycle, but we are friendly, and this is the way that we train, and we welcome people in, and they become part of our culture.
Yeah, proactive versus reactive. What are we doing to anticipate changes, whether it's clinical staff, residents' needs, up and down census, right? That all changes the game when it comes to staffing, and it happens so fast. You think this, I mean, Nick, you guys probably see this all the time. All of a sudden you get 3 to 5 move-ins in a month above what you were maybe projecting because they come in because of crisis or acuity. What do you do with staffing? Where does that come from, right? So those are hard questions to answer, and HR professionals deal with them every single day.
Yeah, I mean, we encourage our buildings to be interviewing people every single day, because you have no idea when somebody's going to, hey, this month we got 3 move-ins this week. Awesome. Celebrate. The caregivers are going to be pissed at the salesperson that week. But also when somebody is going to call off for 100 reasonable reasons, right? Kid's sick, I got to go pick them up. My car broke down. Stuff like that happens all the time. So you need to have a Rolodex of people that you're ready to call. I mean, the biggest frustrating part from our side of the management level is an executive director saying, well, I need a culinary person to come help because I don't have any cooks. Well, if I go on your Indeed and there are 17 people, have you called any of them? And not just sent them the message on Indeed, call them, text them. I mean, I know for me, if I don't recognize the number and it's not in one of the buildings that we're doing new development where I have to be the salesperson, I'm not answering it. I got 100 other fires. But if you text me and say, hey, this is Nick, you applied for my job, I will respond immediately. And we're seeing a faster turnaround with that. So we're getting to our leads or our potential new employees faster and then starting that process. And then what you said about the regulations, I do think that there needs to be a movement on that from state to state, because there are some that will go through the entire process and they won't show up because it took too long. They need money, right? They need to start working.
Yeah, those are great points. Let's keep on this narrative or journey right here, and let's talk about third-party staffing today versus what do we see in the future. Nick, let me start with you here. Do you feel like third-party labor, outside labor marketplaces, the gig economy, if you will, is that a permanent solution with preventing burnout and overtime, or is that just for today? Is that the new shiny toy for today?
No, I think it is a solution that's here to stay, but I think it needs to be utilized differently than how we were using it in COVID and how some buildings are still utilizing it today. It needs to be part of your recruitment process, because ultimately, at the end of the day, if your recruitment to hire new people is perfect and you don't need to change it, this gives you a whole nother lead base of staff that you can potentially hire using any third party. We personally love Care, but it's different everywhere. So being able to touch them, trial them. I mean, I know when we're moving people in, respite stays or day stays are amazing tools, because you wouldn't buy a car if you didn't drive it before. Why would you move into a building? If you could tell me I could go try working at a job for a week or two before saying, yes, I want to commit all of my resources here, I think everyone would jump at it. So utilizing the tool that way, instead of it's always to put out a fire, then you're only treating the symptoms, not the actual root of the problem that you're dealing with. So I think it just needs to be like a mindset shift of how the operators are using it.
Absolutely. Katie, any thoughts on that?
Yes. I had some, Nick does this every day, and some of mine is anecdotal, but I feel like we looked at a third-party solution during COVID as a Band-Aid to get us through. And we lost the personal nature of what staffing can look like. People don't do this job because it's easy. They do this job because they are passionate about it. And so if we can find folks that fit within their schedule, so that gig economy idea, I don't think it's going away. The pandemic changed that for a lot of our younger population or generations coming up, that with an understanding of a home-life balance, which, I mean, you guys are probably not as old as I am, but that was not a word that you used in leadership development when I was a kid. But that the balance is important. And if we can utilize a staffing solution to balance that, that's great. I think the key, and it's what I like about Care and a few others, is there's a way to make that relational, to call the same person so that your resident's getting the same care and the same concern, the same love that they would get if it's a typical staff member. I think that's extremely valuable to the families when they walk into your building. They want to see the same person loving on mom, or the same person giving a report about mom's bad day or grandpa's bad day. I think there's trust that's developed there. And I think the longer that you can develop a relationship with your trusted staffing partner, the better that looks for your community.
Yeah, those are great points. Continuity of care is, right? That's something that we are concerned about. And the ability to use, it was a Band-Aid. I was not at Care during COVID, but I know that usage spiked for short-term usage. It was not being used as a tool we intended. Care was built before COVID we even knew it was a thing. Care was meant to be, I use this example a lot. Remember when cars used to be on the car lot, used to be able to take one home for the weekend, drive it around, try to impress your neighbors, your partner, whoever. That's kind of like Care, the try before you buy situation. And it's a two-way street, because not only is it important for the clinician to try Nick's building or one of Katie's partner buildings, but it's also important for you guys to try that hire before you bring them on full time and you're dependent on them. How many times have we gotten a situation where, and I've done this personally, I hire someone, a month in, I'm wondering, did I make the right hire? And that's not a fun place to be in, because of all the time, effort, money, investment that you put into that situation, to where using a platform. There's other platforms like us out there, but using care as it's tended to be to really try before you buy and have these clinicians come in, and they're kind of starting off from a higher point because they've already worked in your building. They know residents, they know staff, they know Nick, the ED, whoever it might be. They understand where to enter the building, where to leave the building, policies, procedures. So they're kind of starting off from I guess like a higher starting place than you would if you were just coming in fresh. Nick, any thoughts on that? Whether it's generational differences with this new age coming in and the gig economy is here to stay because that's what they prefer, or how you guys are hiring off the platform or other platforms?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you were saying as far as just the try before you buy, like it's so great, especially for operators, and I know for Katie's partners, the amount of phone calls that operators take on Saturdays at 10 p.m. when they're just trying to wind down with their families and there's a new care staff member that you are almost confused how they got your phone number, but you're the one that they called and now you're talking them off the ledge. Being able to know that they're going to do that, they're going to be worried about finding solutions, not finding problems, and helping your operations before you decide to full-time hire them is an enormous tool for us. And then it helps not just the care staff and the residents, but it helps all your leadership, because those 10 p.m. phone calls on Saturdays get old really fast. And that's what's going to cause the burnout from the top down. It's not going to be fun for the caregiver calling. It's not going to be fun for the person taking the phone call. And I think the generation part, I want to say that one generation does it more than others, but they don't. It's every generation. Every generation is whiners.
Yeah. Katie, any thoughts on the workforce that's now entering in, or the workforce? I mean, we know the average age of the CNAs, then they're young 40s. They're going to be aging out, and they're a part of that late wave that's coming into really the sector that become buyers based on situational needs. So what are you guys talking about providing education with and having conversations with operators on how to have conversations to live in this new day and age where the gig economy is here to stay, and there's younger generations now looking to enter the workforce?
Sure. I talked about this a little bit at the beginning about the responsibility for us to train our leaders well. I think one thing happened that was maybe some see as a negative consequence, but could be a positive consequence of the pandemic, is with our Great Resignation, we lost some folks that were really tenured. They were tired and they were burned out, and we moved leaders into roles maybe a little prematurely than we would have in the past. And there's a responsibility. We've got young leaders in their 20s, 30s, and maybe not even in their 40s yet that are leading spaces of people that are much older than them. And so I think there's a responsibility on us from a corporate nature to teach leadership styles generationally down. I think that there's also a responsibility to be prepared when people walk into our communities to work. Often they're there to work. We know that we have direct care workers that are there for a paycheck. That happens. That's the nature of working with humans. But if we can offer the benefit of the doubt and say, I have been prepared for you to come into this space. This is the expectation, and we want to see you succeed. There's nothing better than knowing someone is for you. I want to see you succeed. Here are the tools to get it done. I think that lays on us often from a leadership level to help that trickle down to our next levels of leadership below us. I think leadership goes up and down. I don't know if that fully answers the question, but I fully believe in being for the people that work for you.
That's how you build culture. And I think culture is what keeps people, specifically those in this younger generation, that they're honestly looking for companies out there that are doing good. And what better industry is there than senior living, right? These are the stories and the people you get to meet in the buildings and communities, and to hear their life story. It really doesn't get more impactful than that, because they've lived lives beyond our wildest dreams or our knowledge, right? You never know until you ask someone a question and they tell you about their life, and that just makes my day. Nick, closing comments on generational differences. How are you attacking the new workforce that's coming in, whether it's flex scheduling, full-time? Speak on that, please.
Yeah, so I mean, flex scheduling for the younger generation is really important, giving them options, because they, the younger they are, they want to live their life. That's what we keep hearing from them. Hey, I don't want to work my life to be work. I want to work so I can live. So doing that. And then honestly, what Katie said about, leadership training from the top down, making sure that, if you have somebody in leader who's in the boomer or Gen X generation, giving them teaching on how to communicate with the younger that they may be struggling with. And then the same with millennials and Gen Z, coaching them to have self-awareness that, some of these folks will not take you serious until you have proven that you know your stuff, because you look like their kid, and their kid causes them a bunch of headaches and does dumb stuff when they're not there. So it's nothing against you. It's just be aware of that. And how do you navigate that? So I think the training and then just being flexible with kind of what they need. Everyone's situation is different. If you can do that on the front end and then set your expectations of what you expect them to do in their job. And hey, this is where you're going to be in good standing and you'll never have to hear from me except that you're doing amazing. And here's when you're not there and you're going to hear from me a lot and I'm going to annoy you. If you do all of that, then you're going to get a better employee. They're going to go the extra mile for you and, continue to bring that culture that you're looking for.
That's great. I appreciate that. So I think, Jim, you're going to chime in here with some questions, some Q&A from the audience. So feel free to go ahead.
Buddy, I just want to let you know that I love the way the three of you just answered questions and handed off. That's really what we look for in these types of presentations. So applause right away. I'll give you a chance to catch your breath and get a sip of water, but otherwise we're going to jump right in. We've got a good question from Julie, and I did want to remind everybody you can send in your questions and we'll see them on our end. So Julie asks, curious your thoughts on this. The lack of continuing ed, growth, skill building has been a factor for years in a decision to leave a position. CNAs have been asking for this for years. So what is the barrier to providers offering this to their staff?
I'll
Nick,
go
how
first.
about you start?
I'll go first. The biggest thing for us is just ROI. We're trying to navigate through, hey, so if we want to make this investment in you, we do want to, but then we want to be able to retain it. It's the same with companies. Hey, if we want our leaders to go get MBAs, a lot of times they have exclusivities where, hey, if you're going to go get the MBA, we'll pay for it, but then you have to stay with us for a number of years. So we're looking at that as options. And from the CNA, kind of the way that it's been historically is they're working multiple jobs, maybe in multiple different buildings. So they're not sticking with that same, hey, they're going to work at the building for that same length of time. So I think that if we can get better of the honesty, transparency of, hey, we want to invest in you, but then we have to, as a building, get that ROI out of that, as meaning you're going to become a better leader, you're going to stay with us longer, and you're going to be in good standing, then it's an easy decision. I think that's been kind of the missing piece for a little bit that's holding us back.
We've got a couple of providers in Georgia that took out the exclusivity piece, the you need to stay with us 2 or 3 years longer. And the way that they have verbalized it is, we are here to increase the industry. And if I can make you better and send you off a better person, that looks better for us. Now, not everybody can do that. That's expensive to do. But if you're pouring into that person, we talked a little bit about this, that checks and balance, checking in, how is this process going? What are you learning? Where are you growing? What do you want to do with this? How can I make you a better human or at your job? I think we can help capture some of those folks that are looking to further their education. One thing, and we said it at the very beginning, I think you need to put it into your policy or put it into writing that says, this is a benefit of working with us. Not just, oh, you're doing great, here's a little extra something.
All right, outstanding. I have another one now here from Jackie. Nick, I think this is going to go to you. How are residents responding to flex scheduling? How have you seen the flex impact resident care in general?
So I think for some residents, it's taken a little time to adjust, because if we think about the average age of our residents and their generation, right? We were talking about the generations of the workforce. They were grown accustomed to, hey, this is how people work. This is the time that they're there. So they've had to adjust a little bit that. But I think they've also benefited a lot from seeing, especially as we've gotten the younger generation in, that, hey, they're getting to see more younger people who are reminding them of their great-grandchildren and so on. And ultimately, as long as they're fed, entertained, and taken care of, this generation that's in our senior living communities don't complain. They should complain more for some of the stuff that they have to go through, but they're pretty happy as long as you just show up. So the flex scheduling, I think, has been able to help our continuity of care. So they've benefited from that and they've enjoyed that, getting to see the same person, even if it's for a shorter period of time that day.
Great. Katie, I got one for you from Karen. She'd like to know, where can I learn more about this flex scheduling model that you just discussed?
Sure. I think Evan probably can answer this even better than I can. There are not quite a few. There's a handful of industry partners that offer flex scheduling. There are some that you may already use and you don't know, but CARE has a really great platform for flex scheduling. If you've got a SHRM connection, I bet you have some connections to talk about internal flex scheduling as well. If you're talking about that grouping of flex scheduling that I discussed earlier, I think that you need to be prepared in terms of management to care for that. I don't think it is just a plug and play. I think there is a lot of development and trust that goes into that. But I think that CARE is a really great starting point. Not just saying that because Evan's awesome. I'm saying that because it really is a great platform.
All righty. Well, then.
I
mean to cut you off.
No, thanks, Jim. So flex scheduling, when I talk to operators, a lot of times they'll even work outside their own walls. And when I say that, their own logos, they'll build partnerships with other communities in their local areas. You call flow pool, PRN staffing, whatever you want to call that, flex scheduling. And they'll build teams where, this is the 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. So the first shift or second shift, third shift, if you do 8 or 12s, they'll build little pods of teams where these teams work together to figure out how they can become fully staffed. It builds better camaraderie. People have each other's backs. It builds better teamwork. So obviously you have to start with like almost a centralized quote unquote flex scheduling within your own building, but then you can work with other operators in your local area. If you're a part of a larger organization that is multi-community, you can share staff. I've seen staff shared across, I'm in Houston right now. So Houston, for instance, where they may have a pod of 3 to 4 communities where they can send their own FTEs to each buildings as they stand them up. Obviously that depends on, labor laws and how you set up your own W-2 and LLCs. But at the end of the day, I think there's an opportunity to work better with what you have today, as well as, I keep saying co-opetition, but it's so true. It's competitors and you have that competition, but you can also, in smaller rural communities, you can share that staff and build that out.
Okay, Nick, I have one from Mary, and I don't know, this could be a really mouthful perhaps. Maybe this is something we have to send extra research on, but Mary asks, how do you operational employee pay for performance?
So you can do it either through a bonus structure where you can actually kind of gamify it a little bit. So, hey, whoever is going to be the top performing in your care response rate gets this bonus, second place gets this, third place gets that, and it's all done through the system, so it's data. Or the one that we're really excited to get to use is when they're doing their reviews. So if they're doing their yearly or if they have a biannual, it kind of depends on each one and how they set up. At that point, being able to, besides just fill out that piece of paper that they fill out, that we fill out of, how do you think you did in your job? And then we just talk about how we feel. We can actually bring to that, hey, so we feel this is what the numbers say that validate or go against that. And then, the increase, the salary increase or the hourly rate increase is going to be based off that. So really it has to be the entire system. The technology has to be there so you can have that data to back it up, because otherwise it is a little bit tricky. I hope that answered the question. And I can talk about it more after this. Sure.
No, absolutely. I think that gets right to the heart of what we want. Now, that's a good segue also to Katie. Melissa asks, have you found any technology tools, solutions that have helped you with recruitment?
That's a good question. There's some general ones that we probably all know of. I think the key for recruitment and using technology is the management of it like a project, just like you do for your leads, utilizing whatever your program is, like you would a CRM. You can rank your folks, keeping track of all of the information that's coming in, but also going out. I think sometimes we lose sight of the communication out. I sent this email, and I didn't hear anything back. one of the great pieces of I can't remember if it was Nick or Evan said it earlier, but I was in an HR session a couple of weeks ago, and it was talking about texting our current potential candidates, because folks will jump on the internet and do something with their email address. And then we have a generation that doesn't know how to check their email address. That's a vast generalization, but they know how to text and they know they want a job. And they're going to react faster when it's in their back pocket as opposed to when they have to sit down and open a computer. So utilizing technology to your benefit, using it as a project management tool, just like you would a CRM, will help your staffing measures.
Well, I'll tell you, Katie, you may think that's a vast generalization, but I think you were looking in my dining room window talking about my kids. Send them an email. That's a challenge, right? Text or something is. So, all righty, great. Now, I'd like to go to one more here and then maybe get some final thoughts. Katie, how do you create an environment where staff welcome third-party members? That's got to be on everybody's mind.
Well, listen, Nick is really great if you don't follow Nick on LinkedIn, you need to follow Nick. He's really great about talking about culture. And I think building culture before you bring in any new staff member, whether that's third party or new staff on your team, is valuable. Talking about what are the fundamentals of our team? Why do we exist? And what are our values inside of this space? Not just corporate, but this is a community. This is a home. This is where people live and they're choosing to be here. Now I'm inviting you into this space. I've invited you over for Thanksgiving dinner. I have expectations on how you'll be treated. And so I think if you can verbalize that with your team and make that consistent, when you show up what the expectation is for your regular job, a new visitor coming in gets that same experience. That in turn can help with the recruitment process, because your third party is not just you figuring out them, it is them figuring out you.
Outstanding. Okay, now the toughest question of the day. I think I warned you this was coming. I would like each of you to take about 20, 30 seconds. You've each given up so many great points, and I'm coming at you first, Nick. What is the one thing you have to have the listeners take from this presentation?
I think the biggest thing is you have to think differently than you currently are. If you continue to do the same thing, you're going to get the same results. So you're going to have to change going into 2024. Change is inevitable.
Excellent. Katie, what is the one thing they have to leave in your mind?
I think that you need to know that the people that work for you are working for you because they want to be there and not because they have to be there, and find ways to see them doing their jobs. Sometimes that's the traditional note in a locker that says, great job, I caught you doing something good. Sometimes that's using a tool to say, high five, you've done something great. And sometimes it's giving a compliment so that they could be heard without giving it to them directly. Letting your staff know that you're for them changes the environment in which they get to work.
Great. Evan, what's your best 20 seconds here that people have to leave with?
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Katie and Nick, appreciate you joining us. My final thoughts is lead with empathy in your heart. This is such a great industry that is born on helping and serving others and letting them fulfill great end-of-life care and just to be as happy and healthy as possible. So we appreciate all of our partners doing that. Sit down, listen to your frontline care workers. They will help you recruit and retain them themselves if you just take a second to listen.
Well, outstanding, guys. You've really set a heck of a standard for the rest of today's Workforce Development Forum. I hope everybody's enjoyed this webcast as much as I have. This session will be available shortly at the URL on your screen there. We want to give our special thanks to Nick Jasmine, Katie Ramp, Evan Coe. Some excellent thoughts and insights. We also want to thank our session sponsor, Care. Visit the fine folks there at doyoucare.com. And we want to thank you, our many listeners. You've been a big part of the success today with some excellent questions. Now, I want you to get ready for the second session in today's McKnight's Workforce Development Forum. That'll start at about 12 noon Eastern Time. It's just about in a half hour. The title, The Holidays Are Coming, Is Your Workforce Plan in Place? I've heard a lot of holiday stuff already, so they are coming. Once again, thank you for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you again at all future McKnight's events and webinars. This is Jim Berkland from McKnight's wishing you good health and outstanding days ahead.